The rain slammed against the courthouse glass like 1,000 whispered confessions. Cameras flashed outside as the billionaire stepped through the doors, wrists in silver cuffs, suit drenched and clinging to his frame. His face was unreadable until he saw the boy. Small, silent, dight, eyes just like his. The CEO froze mid-step, battered. His breath caught. The reporters kept shouting, but the world had narrowed. A woman, poised and weather-worn, stood behind the child, his ex-wife. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The child clutched a stuffed tiger, gripping it like a lifeline. The air shifted. The man's empire echoed in his silence. This wasn't a scandal. It was a reckoning. And as the storm howled behind him, the voiceover whispered, "He built an empire, but he couldn't save her." Inside the glass tower of his headquarters, silence reigned. A portrait of the CEO, larger than life, hung above a mahogany desk. He sat alone beneath it, shoulders hunched, tie loosened. Outside, the city buzzed beneath the drizzle, unaware that its most powerful man was breaking. A single photo lay on the desk, a child's drawing, crayons bleeding from water damage. The CEO stared at it, fingers trembling, eyes bloodshot. His empire had conquered industries, shattered records, birthed innovation. But all of that meant nothing now. Not after seeing the boy. Not after realizing what he'd lost. The storm outside mirrored the one inside him, each drop a memory too late. He whispered to no one, "How didn't I know?" But the room offered no answer. Only silence. And regret. On the cover of Time magazine, his face smiled confidently beneath the bold headline, "The Empire Mind." But that magazine now lay crumpled beneath a scuffed shoe. He had stepped on it without noticing. A drone of thunder echoed as he walked, the polished corridor lined with accolades. Framed patents, awards, honorary degrees, all reminders of a man who had built everything except a family. A receptionist avoided his gaze. An intern stared. Rumors would spiral soon. But none would capture the truth, what he saw in that boy's face. A mirror. Not just of features, but of absence. A chasm carved from years of silence. The man adjusted his cufflinks out of habit, though his hands trembled. A storm was coming. And this time, no forecast could predict the damage. She watched from behind a tinted car window. The boy sat beside her, kicking his feet softly, unaware of the quake he had just set in motion. Her eyes never left the courthouse. She had seen the look in his eyes. The man she once loved, now a stranger bound by his past. She didn't bring the boy to ruin him. She brought him to remind him of promises made, of years vanished. The child looked up and asked, "Was that the man from your pictures?" Her hand paused mid-reach. "Yes," she whispered, "but he wasn't ready then." The boy nodded, returned to drawing shapes on the fogged glass. And she? She braced for the war to come. One fought not in courtrooms, but in hearts. The city skyline pulsed in the rain, neon lights smearing like tears down glass. Above it all, the CEO stood on the rooftop of his tower, suit jacket whipping in the wind. He looked out, not at the empire he had built, but at the places he never walked, the people he never knew. Somewhere down there, a boy had his eyes. Somewhere, a woman carried years alone. Lightning flashed, illuminating the storm that lived in his chest. His phone buzzed. He didn't answer. For the first time in years, the man didn't know what to do next. All he could hear was a child's silence echoing louder than boardrooms, louder than applause, louder than the thunder. Long before the empire, there was just a boy standing on a cracked sidewalk, watching his father stumble through another failed promise. The old man, reeking of liquor and desperation, yelled at a landlord while holding a crumpled eviction notice. The boy stood still, backpack slung over one thin shoulder, sneakers too worn to run. He didn't cry. Not anymore. He only whispered to himself, "I'll never be like him." That vow became oxygen, pushing him through sleepless nights and bitter years. But vows are dangerous when forged in pain. They don't always build, they often bury. That boy learned how to win. But he forgot how to feel. And in that moment, when he saw his own son for the first time, his past stood up and reminded him what he left behind. She once stood outside the same boardroom that would later immortalize his name. Not as a partner. Not even as a colleague. She was just the assistant who was too emotional, too bold, too loud with her ideas. But he had listened. Once. In a dusty supply closet lit by fluorescent flickers, they shared their dreams, hers full of community, his full of conquest. They kissed between old servers and boxes of branded pens. Love didn't bloom in candlelight. It bloomed in the margins, and died somewhere between board votes and silence. She didn't resent his success. She resented being erased from it. Now, as she looked at their child, she whispered, "You will never be someone's footnote." The boy never asked about his father, not really. But he always watched. He watched when other kids were picked up by men in suits, arms wide and smiles tired. He watched when Father's Day cards were handed out in class, pretending his blank one was a choice. When he drew family pictures, there was always a missing corner. Empty. Why? Undefined. But he never complained. He became the protector of his mother, the one who wiped her tears with small hands and whispered, "I'll be enough." And he was. Until the day he saw the man from the news, the one on magazine covers, and felt a strange twist inside. Not anger. Not awe. Just familiarity. As if a mirror had spoken back. In the early days, before everything glittered, he used to work the graveyard shift in a dingy data center. He'd sleep for 2 hours under his desk, then start again. He remembered sending her voice notes at 3 a.m., half awake, dreaming of building something they'd both be proud of. "Someday we won't rent ideas," he once joked. "We'll own the whole floor." She'd laugh and whisper, "Just don't forget why we started." But he did. Somewhere between capital rounds and crushed competitors, the laughter stopped. The late-night calls disappeared. And in his pursuit of power, he never noticed her slipping away, until it was too late. She once applied to be his executive assistant again, under a different name, just to be near the son's father. She wasn't called back. No one looked past the resume gap. She deleted her married name. Deleted parts of herself. But he was everywhere. On billboards, in podcasts, in her son's questions. "Why does he talk like me? Why do I have his eyes?" She wanted to protect her child from the weight of abandonment. But silence is a seed. It grows into a wall. And when she saw him again, for the first time in years, standing dazed in the rain, she realized something. The boy needed answers. And maybe so did she. The startup's first office wasn't an office. It was a garage with leaky pipes, 3 chairs, 2 interns, and a fridge that didn't close properly. He worked 12-hour stretches without blinking, fueled by vending machine coffee and ambition. The woman he once loved would bring leftovers, reheated in plastic containers, leaving quietly when he didn't look up. He didn't mean to ignore her. He just couldn't afford to slow down. When he finally collapsed at 4 a.m., she covered him with her jacket, placed a note on his chest, "Don't forget who you're doing this for." But by the time he woke up, she was already gone. And in the silence, all he saw was his next meeting. Success didn't arrive in a parade. It crept in like fog. One day, his inbox was empty. The next, venture capitalists were fighting over a sliver of his dream. He didn't celebrate. He scheduled meetings. His calendar bled red. His assistant reminded him it was his birthday. He nodded. "Reschedule it." The cake she left on his desk melted slowly under the lamplight. By midnight, it looked like regret. Outside the window, fireworks burst. Somewhere, his son turned 5. And the man who promised never to be like his father had just missed another first. He flew first class but slept like a refugee. The private jets, the award galas, the handshakes with billionaires, it all blurred. In one photo op he was shaking hands with the president, in the next, nodding blankly at a team dinner he didn't remember hosting. He carried a photo of a child he didn't know existed, now tucked inside a book, invisible. At times he'd stare at it and ask the air, did I win? Or just outrun everyone? But no answer came. Only silence. Success was louder on the outside than inside. And inside, she stood in their old apartment, now hers alone. The same leaky faucet. The same flickering hallway light. But no laughter anymore. She'd become a mother, a provider, and a phantom all at once. Every corner echoed with what they could have been. She found an old voicemail from him, before the boardrooms and branding, where he laughed and said, "Someday we'll build an empire, and you'll name it." She cried, not for what she lost, but for the boy who would never hear that version of his father. The man who still had love in his voice. In the most expensive suite at the Grand Regent, the CEO stood alone in a room designed for royalty. Glass walls overlooked the skyline. Dozens of unread congratulatory notes littered the counter. He poured a drink but didn't sip. Instead, he walked to the bathroom mirror. For the first time in years he looked at himself, not the public figure, not the genius. Just the man who traded birthdays for board seats. Who silenced love with ambition, who had a son he never knew, and a woman who once believed in him. He touched the mirror, as if to reach through it. But reflections never hug back. He opened the envelope with shaking hands. The private investigator's report was clinical, factual, pages of truth he never asked for. DNA match, 99.98%. Birth certificate, father field blank. The photo attached wasn't recent. It was from a hospital, 7 years ago. The woman in the photo held the newborn alone. Eyes swollen, smile exhausted. She had done it all without him. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. He dropped the pages. They scattered like broken promises. In a world where he controlled outcomes, he had missed the one thing that mattered. His legacy wasn't his company. It was a child whose first steps he never saw. She had never wanted to keep secrets. But every time she reached for the phone, her pride reached first. The night she gave birth, he was across the world closing his first major deal. She had typed his number, stared at the screen, and whispered, "Not now. He's not ready." Months turned into years, and the child became a universe of his own. But she never changed her number. Not once. Deep down, she hoped he'd call. Just once. Ask the question. Hear her voice crack. Let her tell him. But silence became their shared language. And now, she wasn't sure if breaking it would heal or destroy. The boardroom was silent when he arrived late. Hair unkempt. Tie forgotten. He dropped the quarterly report onto the table with a thud. "None of this matters," he said, voice cracked but steady. Executives exchanged glances. Investors blinked. He had built this machine from dust. And now he stood in front of them, unraveling. "There's something I need to do. Someone I need to know." They tried to object. Forecasts. IPO, schedules. Market optics. But he cut through it all with a single look. For the first time, the man who never missed a deadline was walking out. And no one stopped him. She opened the door, not with anger, but with silence. He stood there, unsure whether to speak or kneel. The boy peeked from behind her, clutching the same stuffed tiger. He stared, not scared, just curious. The CEO's throat tightened. "Hi," he managed. The child looked up at his mother. "Is that him?" She nodded once. The boy stepped forward, holding out the tiger. "He's missing an eye," the child said. "But he's still brave." The man took the toy gently, blinking against tears. "So am I," he whispered. And in that moment, the empire builder met the most powerful person in his life, his son. He sat on the floor of the child's bedroom, knees drawn up, hands resting between toys he didn't recognize. Dinosaurs, storybooks, tiny shoes, each one a monument to moments he missed. The boy showed him a drawing. "This is my rocket. Mommy says it goes to dreams." He nodded slowly. "Can I ride with you next time?" The child grinned and said, "Only if you bring snacks." Behind them the woman leaned against the doorway, eyes full but unreadable. He looked at her and said, "I can't change what I missed, but I'm here now." She didn't smile. But she didn't close the door either. The shareholders were ready. The room buzzed with polite tension. Suits shuffled, papers aligned, screens displayed projections. The CEO, once the oracle of strategy, stood at the head of the table, silent. Finally, he spoke. "I'm stepping down." Gasps. A few smirked, thinking it a bluff. But his eyes were different, clear, steady. "There's something more important, someone I want to be." The board chair asked, "What will happen to the company?" He shrugged gently. "It'll survive. Companies always do." He signed the resignation line with deliberate grace. When he walked out, he didn't look back. He had built an empire. Now he wanted to build something harder, a relationship. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe far from the city's steel and glass. She stirred her tea, not looking at him. He held a paper bag, a toy wrapped in recycled comic paper. "I missed everything," he said. "You missed beginnings," she replied. "But there's still the middle." He slid the bag across. "For him." She hesitated. "What about us?" He exhaled. "I don't know. But I remember you. Not just the woman who raised him, the woman who helped me dream." She looked up finally, and for a heartbeat, the world paused. Nothing was fixed. But something had shifted, and that was enough. His son stood in the middle of the park, arms outstretched like airplane wings. "Faster!" the boy yelled. He chased behind him, tie flapping, shoes muddy, laughing like he hadn't in years. The boy tripped, then giggled as his father scooped him up and spun him. "Again!" he shouted. For the first time, the CEO didn't think of meetings, mergers, or markets. He only thought of balance. Not the financial kind, but the human kind. The kind you find in tiny moments of presence. A missed decade couldn't be undone. But joy doesn't measure history. It only asks, "Are you here now?" The house was modest, nothing like the penthouse he once owned. But it echoed with laughter. Toy clutter adorned the floor, a drawing hung crooked on the fridge. Me and Dad. He cooked awkwardly, following a recipe she once wrote on a napkin. The boy peeked over the counter, offering unsolicited advice. "You're doing it wrong," he said. "That's how I know it's mine," the man replied with a smile. When she entered, smelling the burn before seeing it, they all laughed together. It wasn't a perfect home, but it was real, built not on wealth, but on presence, and mistakes, and second chances. He tucked the boy in gently, brushing back his hair. "Will you be here tomorrow?" the child asked. He nodded. "And the next day?" A pause. "Every day I can." The boy grinned sleepily and turned over, clutching the tiger tight. He stood at the doorway, watching the rise and fall of tiny breaths. Behind him, she leaned into the doorframe. "You really left the company?" He nodded. "I couldn't keep building a world that didn't have him in it." She touched his arm lightly. "Neither could I." For the first time in years, they shared a quiet without tension. Just gratitude. Just hope. The office he once ruled now had someone else's name on the door. He walked past it without flinching. There were no farewell banners, no exit interviews. Just nods from a few who dared to meet his eyes. In his absence, the machine kept moving. Quarterly reports filed. Stock tickers rolled. He left behind the crown but took something greater, clarity. At the elevator, he pressed the ground floor button and exhaled. For the first time he wasn't falling. He was choosing to descend. Power had once felt like air. Now, It felt like a trap. And the ground, ordinary human, unguarded, was exactly where he needed to be. She stood before a whiteboard in a community center, pitching an idea to a small group of parents and volunteers. A startup, not for profit but for people. He watched from the doorway, holding their son's backpack. She spoke with fire in her voice, the same spark he had fallen for once. Now, it had matured into purpose. After the meeting she handed out flyers. No applause. Just nods of belief. Mind. He smiled. Not because she needed him, but because she never did, and still chose to let him witness her shine. Some empires aren't made of steel and code. They're made of second chances. And someone to believe in you. He taught his son how to ride a bike in a quiet cul-de-sac. No cameras. No assistants. Just a wobbly bicycle and scraped knees. You got this, he said, running behind him. The boy looked back, smiling, unsure. Then, he let go. For a moment, time paused. The boy rode alone, laughter echoing, wind in his hair. The man stood still, watching his son gain speed. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about presence. Letting go wasn't losing. It was trusting. And in that short burst of motion, he felt more pride than he had in all his boardrooms combined. They sat at a kitchen table, sorting through old photos and boxes. Their laughter came easy now, unguarded, real. She found a Polaroid from their first year together. You used to have more hair, she teased. You used to wear less armor, he replied. Their son ran in with a drawing, proudly displaying 3 stick figures. Who is Bashtam? The man took it, held it carefully, as if it were made of glass. We don't have to be what we were, he said softly. She nodded. Just be here now. And in the quiet after, there was no past weighing them down. Just the possibility of something honest. At night, when the city lights blinked like distant stars, he sat on the balcony with his son curled beside him. What do you think the stars talk about? The boy asked. He smiled. Probably the people who finally looked up. They sat in silence, breathing in the night. No deadlines. No headlines. Just 2 silhouettes on a balcony, sharing the kind of peace that money never buys. He realized then that legacy isn't something built, it's something shared. And love, real love, isn't announced. It's lived. Quietly. Consistently. He didn't need the world to remember him. Just the boy beside him to never feel forgotten. The award gala was buzzing, his name still carried weight. He was invited as a legacy honoree, though he hadn't set foot in this world in months. From the back row, dressed modestly, he watched a new generation take the stage. They quoted his past speeches, cited his strategies, showed slides with his logo. But when the spotlight turned to his empty front row seat, murmurs rose. The announcer cleared their throat. He chose not to attend tonight. He's with his family. And that was true. At that exact moment, he was lying on the floor of a blanket fort, reading a bedtime story in exaggerated voices. The real legacy was giggling under a sheet, not clapping in tuxedos. Back at home, the boy's blanket fort glowed from within, flashlight flickers dancing across fabric like campfire shadows. Tell the story again, the boy begged. The one where you were rich. He laughed. That's a long story. The child giggled. Make it short. So he tried. There was a man who built a tower, but he was lonely. Then he found a rocket and 2 stars. And now, he's never alone again. The boy yawned, curling into his tiger. That's a good one, he whispered. Best I've ever told. And under a roof of pillows, they lay quiet. Far from skyscrapers, but closer to home than ever. She stood by the kitchen window, watching them rake leaves in the backyard. The boy jumped into piles, scattering them with glee. The man followed behind, slower, deliberate. He no longer raced against time, he walked beside it. She brewed tea, hands wrapped around the mug, steam rising like forgiveness. Behind her, the wall calendar had no meetings, no launches, just handwritten notes, field trip, parent-teacher, pumpkin patch. These were the milestones now. Quiet. Dut. Unseen. Sacred. She smiled softly. They were rewriting a story not with dramatic turns, but with consistency. One leaf at a time. In the old office tower, a new CEO sat in his chair. Young. Sharp but old. Hungry. On the corner of the desk sat a small framed photo. The former founder with his son on his shoulders. A reminder of what had been and what mattered. Outside, a janitor nodded at the portrait as he passed. He used to be the king of this place, he muttered with a smile. Upstairs, the boy's drawing still hung in a private conference room, a rocket, 3 stars, and one word. Us. Legacies don't vanish. They evolve. They soften. They root deeper. Especially the ones born not from vision, but from love. On a quiet evening, fireworks bloomed in the distance. The boy stood on the balcony, arms raised in awe. The man stepped beside him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. They watched in silence. Bursts of light, then quiet. "Do you miss it?" the boy asked. "The big tower?" He paused. "Sometimes," he said. "But not like I'd miss this." The boy leaned against him. "But someday I want to build something too." He smiled. "Then I'll help you, if you want me to." The child nodded. A rocket soared in the sky, reflecting in both their eyes. He left the company, but never left her.